Do you remember the first time you saw a magic trick? Maybe it was a rabbit pulled from an empty hat, or you were asked to pick a card, any card. Maybe you've even been lucky enough to see that family-friendly classic, sawing a human in half. On the surface, magic can look like nothing more than clever props and hidden compartments, all mixed in with a bit of theatrical flair. But at its heart lies the art of misdirection. Science can help us explain why certain illusions work better than others, but the principles behind magic can also serve as powerful tools for science. That's exactly what's been happening in the UK's only magic lab at Plymouth University, which was established by magician and psychologist Dr Gustav Kuhn. The magic lab has become a hub for exploring human behaviour and cognition, revealing how and why magic can be so effective in defying expectations. So, join us as we delve into what makes magic so captivating, and discover what research has revealed about the science of magic. Hi Gustav, how are you doing?
Hello, I'm good.
I'm very excited to be here at the Magic Lab at the University of Plymouth. For you, when did magic first become a part of your life?
I got really into magic when I was about 13, and together with a school friend, we got into performing little tricks, and from there we got to know other magicians. And my teenage time was just dominated by magic, and that's pretty much all we did. But in those days, we just did magic to entertain people.
Well, what is magic all about?
At the core of any magic trick lies this experience of the impossible. And so from a psychological perspective, I think of magic as a conflict in beliefs. It creates this conflict between the things that you believe to be possible, so rabbits can't appear from nowhere, and the things that you've just experienced, namely a rabbit appearing from a hat. And to do so, magicians exploit lots of psychological tricks. Although it looks like they can perform real miracles, what they're actually doing is they're exploiting clever psychological tricks to create these illusions of the impossible. I always think of magic, this is a split second in your brain or maybe in the heart where you feel, well, actually, this does feel very real. And I think that's one of the things that people find really enticing.
And you've been able to take that passion forward into your career. So how long have you been with the Magic Lab?
I've been using magic as a way of exploring the human mind for about 25 years now. So I started to study psychology because I wanted to use psychology to improve my magic. But then during my PhD, I realized that a lot of the questions that psychologists are interested in, such as questions about perception or attention, are actually very closely related to the kind of things that I learned to manipulate as a magician. And so for the last 25 years, I've been trying to bring together magicians and scientists to create what is now known as the science of magic.
It sounds like such a fun combination of things. What kind of stuff do you actually get up to at the Magic Lab?
We run a whole range of projects. So some of them are interested in misdirection. So looking at how magicians can manipulate where you look and what you see. So for these experiments, our participants get to see short magic tricks whilst we question them about what they see, or we use neurological methodologies as well. So for example, we can measure people's eye movements to get deeper insights into the things that capture your attention. Magicians don't just manipulate what you see, but they can also manipulate what you think and the things that you choose. So in a typical card trick, for example, I might ask you to pick a card, and even though that choice seems free, as a magician I have techniques that can influence the card that you choose. But at the end of all of this, we always try to apply a lot of these principles to the real world. So some of the projects that we're running at the moment are looking at cybersecurity. There's a lot of close parallels between the type of techniques that particularly mentalists, so these are magicians who do mind reading demonstrations, and hackers exploit. Because a lot of hacking involves exploiting limitations in humans, phishing attempts to get you to hand over sensitive information. And actually, that's very similar to what a lot of magicians do. So I might ask you to think of something, and I'll use psychological techniques to extract that information. And a lot of these principles are very similar to what a cyber criminal will do. So in the Magic Lab, we study the psychological mechanisms that underpin these principles, and then we try and apply that to the real world.
I mean, it encompasses so many more things than you might initially realise, and we're going to get to see a few of those things later on today. You mentioned misdirection there. I was curious to know, is that something that we come across in our kind of everyday lives?
Yeah, misdirection plays a really important role in most of the things that we do. And it happens in different psychological principles. So we could think of it, for example, as attentional misdirection. In misdirection, if I snap my fingers and I'm looking at my hand over here, that will automatically capture your attention. You will attend to my hand, but ignoring other things that are going on. So these are kind of principles that carry a sort of like play an important role in all of the things that we do. So in driving, for example, it's very important to keep your attention on the road, but your attention can be very easily distracted. Misdirection is not just about what you see, it's also what you think. Political misdirection is often used now. Politicians or newspapers will promote certain campaigns, and those campaigns will distract the public's attention from other more important things that are going on. So a lot of the principles that magicians use to create their illusions in the lab play really important roles in most of the things that we do. And again, by understanding the psychology that underpins these principles, we can learn a lot about how our mind is influenced in our everyday life.
I remember having to do my hazard perception test, and you're going along watching that video and there's a child with a ball and someone crossing the street, and you're right, it's almost like it's trying to trick your eye into not quite looking in the right place.
What we find in a lot of this eye tracking research is that often you can actually be looking at something and you still don't see it. And again, that has very important implications for driving, for example, where if you're driving and you're talking to someone on the phone, the general assumption always was that talking to someone on the phone is okay if you're using a hands-free set, because at least you are looking in the right location. But what a lot of our research is now showing is that people can look at something and they don't see it. And that has implications for your driving. So when you're talking to someone on a hands-free set, that really impairs your driving performance. In fact, it impairs it just as much as if you'd be legally drunk. But we don't notice these impairments. And that's the same with misdirection as well. So one of the key principles that misdirection exploits is the fact that it exploits limitations that we're oblivious to. And again, by raising awareness of someone's these blind spots, hopefully we'll be able to change people's behaviour and make them safer.
Is misdirection something that some people are more prone to than others?
What magicians try to do is they try to create contexts in which the misdirection is very effective. If I give you lots of time to think about something and make very careful decisions, misdirection won't work quite as well. Or if I perform exactly the same trick the second time, again, the misdirection won't work that well. And the reason for this is because you know what to attend to. And again, that's the same in real life as well. So if you're really busy and you're not really thinking that carefully, then a lot of attentional cues are more likely to actually distract your attention. And so there's lots of contexts in which misdirection can be more effective or less effective. And again, by understanding these limitations, we can learn important lessons to apply it in the real world.
The human eye is incredibly fast. It makes rapid, subtle movements called saccades that can occur 2 to 3 times every second. That can add up to more than 10,000 in an hour. We make them automatically to shift our focus, but each one briefly suppresses our vision, creating tiny moments where we might miss something. Magicians can exploit these micro-blind spots with well-timed moves, but how do they make sure we're looking in the right direction? It's time for the Clark Kent glasses demonstration. So, talk me through the kit that we've got here.
This is one of the eye trackers that we use. Although this looks like just a non-pair of glasses, it's actually got tiny cameras that are built inside its frames. The cameras will film your eyes, and there's also a camera out here that will film what you're looking at. By using really clever AI and computing magic, you can then work out exactly where you're looking. So these types of devices are often used in psychological research because they give us an online measure of what you are looking at.
My Clark Kent moment.
On this phone, I have a red dot, and that's exactly the point at which you're looking at. So if you just look at my finger and you just follow my finger, you can just do a quick check.
Yeah. And
that tells me that it's perfectly working. Okay, I'm going to show you a very quick trick. Gone. Now, Rachel, did you see how the light has disappeared?
I mean, I didn't see it. I just saw your hands and then it was gone. So.
I'm going to do exactly the same thing again.
Okay.
This time, did you see it?
I did not.
You did not? That's quite surprising. Most of the time that people see it the second time round.
It's at this point I realised I probably should have mentioned I've got severe astigmatism in one of my eyes. Clearly a sucker for magic tricks.
So what's happening here is I'm using intentional misdirection to prevent you from seeing something that's happening right in front of your eyes. If you didn't notice it, what I did was I just dropped the lighter right in front of your eyes. But I used different misdirection cues. So at first I picked it up and you've got this bright light. Now bright things tend to capture our attention, so this should automatically capture your attention. I then pretend to take the flame and move it over here. So what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to move your attention from the lighter to my right hand. And to do so, I use a lot of different cues. So we've got this motion being used, got the sound, so me snapping my fingers, the movement as well, but most importantly, my social cues, so where I'm looking. So people tend to follow other people's gaze. So if I'm looking at the lighter, you will look over here. If I'm looking at my right hand, hopefully you will look over here. So I put all these cues together that hopefully prevent you from seeing the lighter being dropped. And so we can then look at your eye tracking data. So you looked at my face. Most people spend a lot of time looking at faces because we are social beings. We're very interested in other people. And you can see you're looking at the bright light. Your attention is being directed over here, and that's what's preventing you from actually seeing the lighter being dropped.
Wow.
People can actually look at the lighter, and yet they still don't see it. This has got important implications for a lot of the things that we do in the real world, where you feel that you are attending to the right place. But if your attention is being distracted, so you might be talking to someone on the phone or trying to multitask using other things, so your mind is being misdirected, and that can have huge implications for the things that you see. And we find this a lot in road accidents. So people often claim that they were actually looking at the car in front of them, and yet they just did not see it. And a lot of the psychological research now also shows that people can miss huge things happening in their environment if their attention has been misdirected.
It's kind of scary when you think about it, how easily our attention can be directed elsewhere. One of the best demonstrations of this is an experiment by Simons and Chabris, in which a participant watches a video of players wearing white t-shirts and players wearing black t-shirts. They're asked to count the number of times the players in white pass a ball between them. But what half of the participants failed to notice was that halfway through the video, someone in a gorilla suit walks in and beats their chest. This is known as inattentional blindness, a psychological phenomenon in which we fail to notice something because our attention has been directed elsewhere. We actually need this kind of selective attention in order to focus on one task while filtering out irrelevant information. If you think about it, in a social society, it would be pretty hard to function without selective attention, but it does create blind spots in our perception. Blind spots that can be exploited by everyone from Darren Brown to a hacker who wants you to click a malicious link in an email.
It was amazing to see that how these insights into how we pay attention to things can be used in sleight of hand tricks like your lighter trick. But the science lab was taking these concepts and applied them to so many different areas. And you mentioned earlier cybersecurity. So what can you tell me about that project?
So a lot of the principles that hackers use to extract information would be quite similar to the kind of things that a magician does to give the illusion that they can read your mind. And so I can maybe demonstrate this by using experiments that we run in the lab. Are you ready for this? What I would like you to do is think of one of the 9 planets and then write that planet on a piece of paper. I won't look. So what I'm going to try and do now is I'm going to try and read your mind. Okay. So focus on the word, focus on the planet. I can feel a U.
Yeah.
Yes. I can feel an E.
No.
No? I can feel an A.
Yes.
I can feel a T as well in there.
No.
No? Is it Uranus?
It sure is.
Uranus. I was asking you questions, quite specific questions, that gave away a lot of information. So here I've got a flow chart. So I ask you first, was there a U in there? You said yes. I'll then ask you whether there was an E. You said no. And then afterwards I ask you whether there was an A. As you said yes. And the T, well, the only planet that has that combination of letters is Uranus. Now, this is known as progressive anagram. The thing that's interesting about this is that the actual process that I'm using here is very similar to what a hacker or a cyber engineer will use to extract information from people about passwords and things. So you may think that a simple piece of information, such as your internal number within the company or your date of birth, that all of those small pieces of information are completely meaningless. And yet every time you're handing over a piece of information like that, that will give a cyber criminal more opportunities to then put all of that information together, which essentially would then afterwards allow them to get your password. And so what we've been doing in our research is trying to understand why it is so easy to extract this type of information, but also using these type of demonstrations to make people aware of their problems in terms of guarding sensitive information like this.
I remember when I was a bit younger and, hanging around on social websites a lot, and you used to get sent these sort of silly quizzes, and it would quite often ask you seemingly obscure questions. But could that perhaps be a kind of phishing technique?
Yeah, exactly. In the same way that I'm asking for letters here, you might think, well, that's not a very important piece of information. But me knowing the name of your pet can be very important, because quite often a lot of the security questions, for example, they may ask you for the name of your pet. If you've handed over that information in a different website, then I as a hacker have actually got access to this information. And again, what we're trying to do here is trying to use magic as a tool to study these principles, but also just highlight how vulnerable we all are to handing over information like that.
And it's fascinating to hear how the concepts of magic can be applied to understanding something like that. Another area of your research, I think, touches on the placebo effect.
Placebo has got to do with our beliefs. So we believe that some type of medicine will make your headache go away, and indeed, just sort of like taking inert medicine that has no biological effect can actually often cure you. And so what I have here is a placebo device that we use in our experiments. So in the experiments, we hook our participants up to electrodes, and we then claim that we can use this device to use neurostimulation to influence what you're thinking of. Now, that's not possible yet, but by using magic tricks, we can give the illusion that we can use these neurostimulation devices to change your brain activation and your cognitive functions. The majority of our participants genuinely believe that this thought insertion actually works, and we then see, well, can this same technique then be used to change other cognitive functions? So, for example, could I make you more creative? And the answer is yes. So if we then kind of like use different types of creativity tests, and we now tell our participants that, well, now we're going to switch this device onto creativity mode, so we're going to have to stimulate your prefrontal cortex and make you more creative, people do genuinely feel more creative after this procedure.
So a lot of magic seems to sort of center around this idea of being able to influence the way that people think. Do you know if this taps into at all things like the spread of misinformation?
Yeah, magic is all about misinformation. When I'm performing a magic trick, you know that what you are seeing is not real, and I as a magician, I'm constantly lying. We've been studying misinformation in the lab as well. So a lot of spiritualists, for example, they use magic tricks to give the illusion that they can contact spirits or deceased people. And in the lab, we've been using magic tricks on our students to give a fake seance or a fake psychic reading. A large proportion of our students genuinely believed it was possible to communicate with dead people. That was very surprising. But the most surprising thing was that even when we told our participants that what you are seeing is not real, they still believed it. In actual fact, those warnings had very little impact on what they believed was possible. And I think this gives us really important but quite alarming insights into the spread of misinformation.
Another trick that quite often comes up in shows is that classic sort of mind-reading encounter. And I mean, I suppose it's time we should address the robot in the room. What can you tell me about Pepper?
A lot of people, when they see someone doing mind reading demonstration, like Darren Brown or so, they do genuinely believe that it's real. And I think that's because we know less about the human mind, and we're more likely to, more inclined to believe that mind reading is genuinely possible. And so as such, mind reading can provide us with a great tool to study this boundary between the possible and the impossible. And that's exactly what we do with Pepper. Now, of course, Pepper can't read minds, so we use a magic trick to give the illusion of her reading minds. People are convinced that it's real. Like, they put all critical thinking aside, and it does genuinely feel real. So if I perform a magic trick and I say, okay, I'm going to read your mind, you're probably going to be a little bit skeptical. But if Pepper, a robot, does this, well, maybe that is possible. And of course, we've got used to this idea that AI can do things that is just not possible yet. And even for myself, when I watch Pepper read my mind, even though I wrote the script myself, it just feels real. And so I think that's a very powerful, I think magic offers a really powerful tool to study some of these questions.
And so mind reading in the context of, you know, sometimes you might go to see a Darren Brown show and you'll be a crowd member among hundreds of people, and he manages to sort of put an idea into your mind without you realizing. Is that what you would call mentalism?
So mentalism is an area of magic that deals with mind reading or psychological phenomena or predicting the future. It's all the type of tricks that often don't involve physical objects. And the thing that's interesting about mind reading is it just feels a lot more real than the physical magic.
And so I myself have actually gone to a Darren Brown show in the past, and I'm that really annoying audience member who's trying to spot a trick as it's happening. What's your take on kind of the difference between some people who need to sort of peek behind the curtain, and then you have other people who are just happy to let the magic happen?
So we have been doing some research looking at type of people who enjoy magic and those who don't. But for me, one of the really interesting questions is that, well, why do some people want to know how a trick is done and the others don't? Now, I don't have any answers to that yet, but it is one of these questions that we'll hopefully be looking at in the future.
And when it comes to misdirection, I mean, is there anything you know of that, as an observer, you could be perhaps on the lookout for to spot misdirection in action?
I think the most important aspect of it is to just realize how easily we are distracted. The biggest illusion in magic is that we're unaware of these limitations. Again, like think about driving, for example. I'm a cognitive scientist. I've studied misdirection for many years, and I know how dangerous it is to be driving whilst being misdirected. For example, I was talking to someone on the phone. If you think about drink driving, there's no way I would ever step into a car drunk. Like, I know how alcohol can impair my performance. We've got limited processing capacities, but what we can do is we can change the situations we put ourselves into. So once you just understand just how easily you can be distracted, we'll remove some of the distractors. We are distracted by phones. Remove the phone. We are very bad at multitasking, and when we're multitasking, we're also more easily distracted. So create situations where you don't have to multitask that much. And I think that's probably the biggest lesson that you can take away from this.
And I feel like that example of driving is really interesting, because one thing I've always wondered about is sometimes if you're driving and you encounter a sort of stressful situation, you need to turn the radio down to see better, and it doesn't really make sense, but I suppose in terms of that mental capacity thing, it kind of does add up. So it's interesting to hear how the science of magic can make you see situations like that differently. I was interested to know, for you, you spent your life in magic. Now that you've spent 25 years studying it, has it changed how you enjoy it?
I still love magic. There's some tricks I know how they're done, others I don't. I think as a magician and as a psychologist, I guess you start appreciating different things about magic. I love all the clever types of deception that are being used by magicians. And I guess as sort of like an expert in any field, we look out for other things. That's the things that we really enjoy. But knowing about the secret and knowing how it's done definitely does not ruin the illusion for me.
And it's interesting to hear how much we've learned, but there's obviously so much more to explore. What unanswered questions about the science of magic are you most excited to tap into?
I mean, magic is one of the oldest forms of entertainment, and yet the scientific study of magic really dates back to this century. For me, one of the really exciting areas is now this link between magic and cybersecurity, because I think there's such close links between the techniques that hackers are using and mentalism techniques that I think magic can provide us with a really powerful technique, tool to study some of these processes. It's also very difficult to actually study hacking in the lab ethically, because as psychologists we are bound by human ethics, and it's often quite difficult to get ethics passed to study deception. But of course, in a magic trick, we can actually study the same principles, but in a safe environment. And so that provides us with a great tool to try and understand some of these principles.
I mean, I just feel like with magic, there's so much. There's the great history, incredible techniques. And now it's kind of going into this futuristic area with Pepper and with the cybersecurity. If people want to find out more about your work, where can they go?
So to find out more, get in touch with us, the Magic Lab at the University of Plymouth. There's also the Science of Magic Association, which is an international organisation that brings together magicians and academics from all fields of study to further the scientific understanding of magic.
Well, thank you so much for your time today, Gustav. It's been so amazing to get to have a look around at the Magic Lab, and really great to meet you.
Thank you, Rachel. It's been a pleasure welcoming you here at Plymouth.